This was such an incredibly surreal experience for me. Rurouni Kenshin is finally back. The brand new anime premiered today. Just watched the episode. By the way, it premieres around 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Crunchyroll if you're wondering when it drops, because I was eagerly refreshing the screen, waiting for this moment. Man, this has been one of my most anticipated anime since I heard of its announcement, but the reason being is because Rurouni Kenshin, the series, has a very passionate resonance with me. It has a very strong nostalgic value. It was the first manga that I really fell in love with. It was the first manga that I ever bought, and it was my favorite manga until I read Berserk, so now it is number 2. But that is no slight to its quality whatsoever. I still think it's peak. I still think it's excellent, and it's a story that has a lot of meaning for me. Now, if you've been around my channel at all in the past however many years that I've had it, I've mentioned Kenshin on several occasions. I've reviewed the manga. I've talked about the other anime adaptations. I talked about why the Jinshu arc was never animated, even though we might get that depending on how well this series does, and I've talked about it a lot. So now finally seeing a new anime version was a really surreal experience, and I'll tell you why is because the 90s anime version I kind of know back and forth. I've rewatched it dozens and dozens of times from the time that I was probably 14 years old to now being 34. 20 years I've been watching that show. And so watching the first episode of this new anime was really interesting because I was kind of remembering the first episode of the 90s anime as I watched it and kind of comparing and contrasting in my mind. And there's a lot I like better in the 90s version, but I will say that this version is following the manga much more accurately because there's a character here named Kihei who's not even in the 90s version. So I think this is a good promise as to the things that we're going to get kind of moving forward in the anime, because it is following the manga almost down to a T, like almost exact, which is great also because one of the things the 90s version is heavily criticized for is that it has a lot of filler. There's a lot of filler in season 1, none in season 2, and then season 3 is all filler. So you kind of get a mix in season 1, no filler in season 2, and then season 3 is all filler, and that's it. And it doesn't finish the anime. There's still an entire other arc that ends the it doesn't finish the manga. I'm too excited. It doesn't finish the manga. There's an entire final arc that was never featured in the 90s anime. So to me, one of the most exciting things is the potential of getting to that final arc and getting to see that animated. But in the meantime, being able to see it follow the manga as closely as it is and not have that filler, not have to worry about filler because the manga isn't still being worked on. You know, it's finished, it's complete. So they don't need to add in any filler at all. You know, they can just kind of follow it through all the way that they want to. And if they think of new ideas or ways to expand on things that are in the manga, I don't have a problem if they do add filler or if they add kind of a comedic episode or a beach episode. Every anime's got to have a beach episode, right? Now, as I review these episodes, I'm going to have to kind of toe a tricky line because I don't know how many people that are going to watch this video are anime onlys that are new to Kenshin and don't know anything about the series or the characters, or how many of you are like me, you know, older and you grew up with Kenshin and now you're here to re-experience it. So when it comes to talking about the series and spoilers and upcoming arcs, it's going to be hard to kind of navigate how I want to actually talk about it, because obviously I can go into extensive detail on many different things, but maybe I want to keep it just straight up to the episode itself. And I think what I'm going to try to do is mostly just talk about the episode itself, but from time to time I might mention or reference things that are going to happen in the future, and I'm going to try to do it not in like a spoilerific way, just maybe like a comment that if you're a long-term fan, you'll understand what I'm talking about. And if not, you'll just kind of be like, oh, cool, I can't wait to see that. That'll be exciting when that happens. So that sort of thing. Also, the only thing that is not manga accurate of this episode is the very beginning, the intro. Now, I understand why they did this because with Kenshin and like a lot of other anime, Vinland Saga did this too, is that you want to start off your series with an action sequence, just because of anybody that might not know what the property is will be interested to see like what kind of action there is to expect coming up. So it's just a way to kind of like break into the show and show you the potential before we get into the story. And that's kind of what it was. And it also has extreme relevancy because Kenshin is a series about a man who used to be known as Batosai, the Manslayer, a legendary Hitokiri, or an assassin, during this time of war. Also, Kenshin relies a lot on the history of Japan. Now, you don't really need to know a whole lot of the in-depth ideas of what's happening, Basically, all you need to know is that 10 years before the show premieres, there was this big war in Japan. Kenshin was fighting on the side that eventually won. And at some point within that 10-year span, he decided to give up killing, give up his actual sword, and get a reverse-bladed sword, which is dull on the front side that you would actually slice with. So instead of slicing people in half, he's just hitting them with a blunt object, right? So something happened. It doesn't explain why he decided to become a wanderer. That's what a Rurouni is. Rurouni basically means a guy that just wanders. He's a bum. He just wanders from place to place, gets in adventures, just kind of walks the earth, right? Pulp Fiction reference there. So that's basically what it is. So there was a big war. The war is over. A new era of Japan is now in place that's supposed to be more peaceful. But in reality, you can tell there's corruption. There's the scene where Kihei kind of pays off the police officer. They're supposed to have rules about you're not allowed to carry a sword out in public, but yet there's still murders happening. So you get the idea that things are supposed to be peaceful. Things are supposed to be going in a better, more positive direction. But there's a lot of corruption that is still happening, which is just inevitable with people that are in places of power, right? And Kenshin is sort of responsible, in a way. He played a part in creating this new world, this Meiji era, right? Which is what we're in right now within Kenshin. And Kenshin's going to deal with a lot of the ideas of, how do we maintain peace? Is peace actually something that can actually happen between humanity? And what does it mean to kind of to be a person that has this sort of tragic past, and what kind of things can you do in the present time that by your continued existence, you in fact make the lives of other people better. So even if you have this horrific history and there is horrible things you've done in your past, you're always going to have to, you're never going to reach a point where that goes away. But what can you do now while being alive that can sort of help people in the moment, right? And so Kenshin sort of it's not like he's going around looking for, people to save, right? But if there is a situation in which he can help, in which he has the power and the capability to do something, he's going to do it. He has that sort of honor. He has that bravery. He's not a man that is opposed to fighting if the situation happens. It's just a matter of, can we avoid this? And if it has to go down, I'll do it, but I'm not going to kill anymore. So that's kind of where Kenshin's at. Anyways, what I meant to say was that the beginning of this episode starts in the past during the war, where we see Kenshin as the Batosai, where he was killing people. And this is the part that shocked me, is because we see another character that was on an opposing side named Hajime Saito. And Saito is my second favorite character in the entire series, and at times he is my favorite. It's like Kenshin and Saito, and they're sort of every once in a while I kind of switch who my favorite character is. And he's not a character that we should see until the second arc or a season 2 of the series. So the fact that they threw a scene in with him in this flashback surprised me, and I was really stoked about it. I couldn't believe we were actually seeing Saito. He even has the first line of dialogue in the series. You're like, what? Saito is here already? Sign me the fuck up, man. Saito is a dude. Just wait until he actually enters the story, man. Saito is a fucking monster, dude. I love this guy. Anyways, then it cuts to present timeline. Kaoru meeting Kenshin in the street. She's searching for somebody that is posing as a member of her school, using her style of swordsmanship, calling himself Batosai, and murdering people in order to ruin her reputation and the reputation of her school. And Kaoru has an interesting backstory too, where her father wanted to create this school of swordsmanship for peace. They use wooden swords, they don't use real swords, and it's meant to kind of protect other people rather than the art of murder that most swordsmanship actually is. So it's a fantasy idealistic style of swordsmanship, but it's something that within this new era might be possible if we can kind of continue this moving forward, right? So the other character, Kihei, the old man that is trying to convince her to sell her property, he's not featured in the 90s anime, but he is in the manga. So what I noticed about that right away watching this episode was the excitement of knowing that this series is going to follow the manga a lot more closely, which I appreciate. Same thing with Kenshin going to investigate Gohei Hiruma and going to his dojo or the other dojo where they were hanging out at. That doesn't happen in the 90s, but it is in the manga, so That stuff makes me happy. Now, as far as the animation and stuff goes, I mean, obviously I prefer the 90s aesthetic over the new version for sure. Also, some people might say like the fight scenes were really quick and like, you know, kind of like stunted imagery, and I could see that, but it's kind of the same in the 90s because what you're going to come to find is that Kenshin is such a fucking badass when it comes to swordsmanship that it takes a while before another character shows up that can actually like really fight him. Like most of these people Kenshin is going to take out in one swing, and that's normal. It's not until probably like episode like 6 or 7 that we're actually going to get a character that can fight Kenshin, right? Like it's going to be a little while. So that's not the fault of the animation or the anime. That is literally the story. Like it's just meant to show what kind of a level Kenshin is on, and that like these regular dudes with swords like stand no chance whatsoever, right? And then of course there is the kind of blooming, you know, will they, won't they idea of Kenshin and Kaoru, because he obviously takes a liking to him, and he actually does agree to stick around. So they kind of are planting the seeds of that too. And the episode basically ends in the same spot that episode 1 of the 90s ends at. So it is kind of strange. You could watch the episodes side by side and compare them. You know, I kind of could just compare them in my brain because I just remember the fucking 90s series so well. And there is a lot of differences, but it also is the same. And that's the surreal part of it. It's like I'm watching this episode of a thing that I've seen a million times, but it's different. You know, it's just kind of was strange for my brain to process. I'm like, I know exactly everything that's happening, but it's different. It's new, you know? Opening and ending songs were cool. I did notice the moment in the opening credit song where they showed Kenshin kind of stand up, holding his sword, which was a reference to the original opening song. So that was really cool. The songs are not as good as the opening and ending songs of the 90s, but I like them. I think they fit the mood. They fit the tone. And what else can I say, man? I felt like I had more to say about it, but I guess not. It went by quick, you know? Next episode is probably going to be the introduction to Yahiko. Then we're going to have Sanosuke. And then it's going to get into kind of more dangerous things as time goes on. We're going to get introduced to the main cast, you know, episode by episode. And then it's going to kind of flow into more story arcs. Now, if you're new to Kenshin, the first arc isn't really like an overarching long storyline. It's kind of made up of like 3 or 4 mini arcs. It's just called like the Wandering Swordsman arc. So there's going to be a couple of different segments. And then when we get further into the series, like probably season 2 is going to be all one giant arc. And same with season 3, potentially. Anyways, this was great for me. This was great. I'm a huge Rurouni Kenshin fan, and I just, you know, I've been waiting for a reboot for so long. Actually, I just wanted season 3. I mean, I wanted the Jinshu arc to be animated, you know? I wanted a season 4 of the 90s anime, and I kept like crossing my fingers for like 20 years, and it never happened. But you know what? This is good too, and I enjoy it. I appreciate it. Other than that, now if anybody is going to mention, I'm sure in the comments somebody will mention the controversy with the author. I've already given my thoughts on that a bunch of times. I've made a dedicated video to it. Obviously, I don't agree. I separate the art from the artist. I wish he was still in jail. I wish he got a worse sentence than he actually did. There is that there. It's the elephant in the room. I understand that. But I'm not going to address it in like every single Kenshin video because that'll just get like monotonous, and I want to talk about the series. That's actually my focus, is like I want to talk about the series and the characters and make that the focus. I don't want to talk about the author because fuck the author. I don't care. I don't care about him. All right. I care about Kenshin. All right. Kenshin means a lot to me. The author does not. So that's where I stand on that. Anyways, but I you know, I don't blame anybody for wanting to watch it or wanting not to or wanting to pirate it. Like I get it. I get it. I just want the series to do well enough so that it gets to the Jinshu arc, which is the last arc of the series. That is my hope for it. So however you choose to consume it is fine. I just hope that it does well enough just to get there. I just want to get there. It's going to take a while, but maybe. Anyways, guys, thanks for watching this video. Let me know what you thought about the premiere episode of Rurouni Kenshin 2023. I'm so happy to be talking about Kenshin on the channel, man. And it's actually relevant. I'm not like, hey, let me talk about this thing I read 20 years ago and tell you why I love it and try to convince people. Now maybe people will actually like want to talk about Kenshin again. So yeah, anyways, if you want to support the channel on a deeper level, I have Patreon channel memberships turned on, all the links where you can follow me in the description. Other than that, I hope you have a wonderful day, guys, and I'll talk to you next time.